You're listening to the Manning Up on Real Estate podcast with your host, Cameron Manning. We bring you the industry experts each episode who will help you man up on your real estate career. Welcome back to the Manning Up on Real Estate podcast. I am your host, Cameron Manning. I am excited for you guys to be here joining me again. We have another amazing interview coming to you, and I just know that you're going to feel the energy that's going to come from this speaker, because every time I'm talking to her, every time I'm listening to her, you can just tell she's got an absolute passion for what she does. Not only is she an investor herself, but she also is leading the investment team at Prime Brokerage. But we're excited to have you. This is Lindsay Gowan. Welcome to our stage. How are you doing today?
Awesome. Thanks, Cam, for that amazing intro. I'm glad to be here. And it's weird to see the face-to-face, and we always just have conversations. But I forgot to tell you, you have to change your podcast name. It's actually Womaning Up on Real Estate. I'm sorry. Forgot to give you that memo. And if we have to change your last name, we might have to too.
All right, we're going to be Cameron Womaning now. It's actually funny because I was wondering about that when I was launching the podcast. Actually, it was three women who actually came up with the name originally. So
interesting,
right? So I was when they came up with it, I actually did a bit of a field test before I used it, and it was actually funny. Most of the women had resonated, but I was always worried that there was going to be somebody call me. And today it finally happened. But you know what? Today for the podcast, we're going to officially call this episode the Womaning Real Estate podcast, because honestly, when you listen to Lindsay, you're going to find out that she has an absolute passion for inspiring women to get into real estate, investing, and building their wealth. And I know it's going to come across when you listen to her. But before we dive into all of that, Lindsay, let's pull it back a little bit. You've been an active realtor now for a couple of years, but you started off as an investor first. So what led you to wanting to become a real estate investor?
Yes, good question. And it's funny because all along, my dad had always told me, you should be a realtor, like that should be your job. And I was like, obviously you push away from whatever your parents say, but
I've got something to add to that after, so bring me back to it.
Yeah, awesome. And I mean, realtors don't have the best image out there. So I don't think I had the best idea of what a realtor was and what a realtor could be. So I always pushed away from that. But let's back up. So my background's interior design. So I have a degree in interior design, and it's funny where that has led me, but I love where it's led me. So graduating, I was really burnt out with interior design. So the next obvious step was teaching English in South Korea. So that's where I went from there.
Oh, wow.
Traveled. Yeah, I know. The obvious next step, right?
Right. Totally.
So
interior design to South Korea.
So I traveled for about a year and a half. After that, backpacking across Southeast Asia, came back, and then that led me to working in flooring sales. So that 5 years or so between two different jobs. After that, I was just curious about how I could leverage, just get ahead, like stop working that 9 to 5. I think that's a common struggle that a lot of us real estate investors have, is how do we make our money work for us? And how do we not have that 9 to 5 struggle? So that led me to a real estate investing conference, which I know you know the Key Spire. So I had gone and I had just done the initial 2-hour like see Scott McGillivray live in person that kind of gets you all out.
Woohoo, Scott McGillivray!
Exactly. So I went to that, and then they offered like a 3-day training session, which I was like, yeah, maybe. My mom was like, oh, you have to do this. And I'm like, okay. So my dad and I went for Father's Day weekend. And after the weekend, I was like, I'm doing this. Like, I am investing. I have to invest in myself. I have to put myself up against a wall to go and do it. Like, unless I do. And it's funny because I had a mentor that flipped houses, that did all of this, invested in a different program. And he said, don't buy anything. I'll give you everything for free. That's great, but it's not putting any money on the line. It's not incentivizing me to actually go and do it. So yeah, I'm like, okay, I'm buying in. So a few credit cards later, a good loan from my parents, I had bought in. And it's funny because it seemed like such a large amount of money at the time, but now like in a year or less, that was paid off back in like,
100%.
It's hard to quantify because even just where I am now, like I wouldn't have met Prime without going through all of this. So it's completely changed my life. And without that one decision, without making that big move at the time, it wouldn't have led to all of these amazing opportunities. So at the time I had a condo, and the condo that I had, I bought it just to get out of my parents' house. Like I didn't, yeah,
Classic thing, right? You know, I just got to get out of the
exactly.
house. Screw it. I'm going to buy this place just so I'm out.
Exactly. So I'm like, I bought, it was 104,000. I know, wouldn't we all
Wait,
buy like 20 of these?
104? I mean, I'm from the lower mainland. Is that like, we don't have that.
Exactly. And I mean, we don't have that anymore because it's like tripled since then.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a shift in people's minds that they have to get around that. But 104,000 at the end of the day, that was the biggest purchase I had ever made in my life.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's a 6-figure investment that, you know, the most you've maybe done is like, you know, $20,000 car or something like that, right? You know, so
exactly.
like, you know, people put like $1,000 down on a car. So
yeah. And I mean, I had to put like $8,000 down on this, like with a 5% mortgage purchase plus improvements. So I had all that built into the mortgage. So a year and a half later was when I went to this conference, and I was like, okay, I need to sell this condo and buy something that's going to produce me money. So I was thinking a duplex, even a house with a basement suite, something like that. I found a duplex. So sold a condo, bought a duplex, and just got really obsessed with real estate. And then since then, I've done a couple joint ventures, partnerships with my parents, which have been really good, actually. They understand the value of real estate, which I think is half the battle. And working with family, I know it can get complicated, but they are very hands off, and that's what they were looking for in an investment. They had a couple student rentals that they were sick of plunging toilets. They were sick of cleaning them after the students had wrecked it. I handle everything with the tenants. They don't do anything like that. I actually brought my mom to our property that we have in St. Thomas, and last summer we were on our way, and I didn't grab rent. Her comment as we drive up, oh, is this the one we own? Like, that's how hands off they are.
That, for some people, they love that though. You know, it's simple, easy armchair investing. And if you can provide that, especially to family members, that's amazing. Like that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of, I got pretty obsessed in like with real estate. And then Prime, I was working with the brokerage that I work for now, and I was working with them on a couple of deals, and Justin, the owner, had reached out and asked if I would ever get my real estate license. And at the time I was like, you knew my opinion on realtors. So like, I don't really think I want to be a realtor. Like, my dad had already tried to convince me during flip properties that we had done.
Yeah.
But it was
there are these sleazy guys with slicked back hair and fancy suits on, right?
Exactly. But I knew the Prime team. I knew the people I was working with. Nathan was my realtor at the time.
Oh yeah. I remember. I met Nathan.
He's awesome. Still really good friends. And I call him anytime I'm thinking about a deal. Actually, I better call him after this because I'm thinking about a deal. So
we'll talk about that.
I still call him my realtor, which is awesome. And it wasn't that I was becoming a realtor. It was that I got to work with the Prime team. So that was a different shift. And I knew how they approach real estate and how they approach real estate transactions. It's not a transaction, it's a relationship.
Absolutely.
So that was different than anything I had ever known in real estate, any realtors. So I couldn't pass that opportunity up. So the next phone call was to my mom, and I was like, okay, I'm becoming a realtor. And if you know me, like when I get something in my head, it happens. I make it happen, and I get really obsessive, I guess sometimes I would say, but it can be a pro and a con, but here I am.
There we go. I love it. You know, honestly, the reason why I knew your story, we've talked about it before, but Lindsay and I have a very similar story, right? For me, it started same thing. You know, I had an interest. You know, my parents were getting me kind of involved in business, and I heard same thing, a 2-hour preview event. Now, this is before the days of Keyspire. Keyspire wasn't around yet. So for me, it was the Rich Dad program. Right, Rich Dad Education. Same thing, 2 hours turned into a 3-day program, turned into a $30-something thousand investment, and like so much training afterwards. And you're right. The biggest thing though I find with people who take the seminars, whether it's Keyspire, Rich Dad, whatever, is you're going to have a large group that are going to spend that money and they are going to lose it because they don't do the one fundamental piece, and that's the action component, right? Education without action is just, it's useless at the end of the day. And you went out and you started taking action. You're like, okay, I got this condo, I got equity. What can I do with this? And then you tapped into joint ventures right away. So same thing, I started buying properties. And here's the thing, I resisted becoming a realtor for a long time too. Longer, I think, than you did. I think they broke you sooner than I did. So I've been at this, I started 12 years ago and I've been licensed for 6. So it took me 6 years to get to the point where I was going to become a realtor because my grandmother, there's the family member, says, that investing stuff is very, very risky. Why don't you just become a realtor? Because then you can get a solid paycheck. What she didn't know is that, obviously, for those who are listening, being a realtor is not a solid paycheck either. You definitely have to go out and hustle. You're basically unemployed between each client. So I don't think she understood that. But it wasn't until I started working with my mentor, my I would call her my rich mom, that she's like, Cameron, I made that mistake too. Get your license, get on it, and it's easy to invest and be a realtor at the end of the day. So very similar stories.
Love it.
It's interesting how a lot of people go through that. So let's talk a little bit more about the investing side of things. You're an active investor. We do have a lot of investors who listen to this podcast. Let's talk about some of the joint ventures that you have done. So you've done some with your parents. What other kind of structures of deals have you done that have made it work for you?
Yeah. So as I have become a realtor, I'm less than 2 years in. I have less than 2 years of tax statements to show that I'm a realtor on paper, I guess you would say. So that is the struggle right now. I can't get a mortgage. I can't get a mortgage with an A lender and get good terms and whatever. So I recently refinanced my duplex that I bought. This one is a good one too. So this was the second property I bought. I bought for $355 in London. At the time, again, Nathan had shown me the property and I was like, okay, like it's not a screaming deal, but I was also going to live in it. So it was in a good location. I was moving into the lower unit, renovating it. Upper unit, still, it didn't make that much money, but I was living in it. So it didn't quite matter as much. I just refinanced that property for $660. So, and that was 2.5 years ago. So yeah, I'm pretty glad that I did that. And it's not something that you bank on at the end of the day, that appreciation. But if you're investing in good areas, then that has a lot more to say when you are doing those refinances. And it's not just about cash flow at the end of the day.
Well, actually, I'm gonna just kind of interrupt and stop you there, because obviously you've just hit that chord that I fight with a lot of investors for. And honestly, like, I see a lot of people, in my opinion, they do make a bit of a mistake, is that they're so focused on cash flow. And 100% cash flow is great. Don't get me wrong. If you're listening to this, and don't stop the podcast, but it's not the end all be all. Cash flow is great to keep you moving, but I hear a lot of people make the mistake, I want to buy so many cash flowing properties so I can retire and live off my cash flow. But at the end of the day, if you're strictly living off cash flow and you're buying in areas that do not necessarily appreciate or grow that much, and maybe you're making $1,000, but what happens if you have that roof that goes? Now all of a sudden you're making 10 grand a month, and you got to take that 10 grand and put it into a new roof on one property. What happens then? You know what I mean? You don't have a fallback if you're just banking on the cash flow. So I like that you said, it's not all about cash flow. You definitely have to invest in areas that are going to grow as well, right? And I think you're investing in the London market and around Toronto. Those are high appreciation areas that don't necessarily yield the greatest cash flow, but you can find it, right?
Yes. And I think, yes, it's so important. Like, cash flow is not everything, especially to me. I know there are some investors that is their strategy, and that's great. Mm-hmm. But I'm younger in my investing career. I have time to kind of balance it all out later on. Like, maybe I want some cash flow later, but right now it's more about building and buying in those great areas that are attracting good tenants. And I think it's also a bit of a mind piece too, is cash flow is not found, it's created. So in a lot of these deals that don't look so great on paper, they might be negative cash flow, or you might not understand how this is really like going to work. There's a lot of active appreciation that you can get in a property that is going to balance out that negative cash flow in that time. And then as you turn it over, you get ideal tenants, you get market rents. So I'm talking about duplex conversions here. This is what my next strategy is that I've been talking to a lot of investors about, but I think we were talking last night, and I need to do it myself. Like it's enough to say it, but I need to show people how great it is. And I really believe in them. So I might as well take one for myself, show others how you can do it. So it's a single family home that we're looking at, and it would require a large renovation, about 100,000 for both units. But at the end of the day, when you're refinancing this, there's about 50,000 of equity that you can gain in the property just from that active renovation that you're doing. Not to mention your rents will then be, let's say, $400 a month cash flow, which is impossible to find on the market. So a good example of how cash flow is created, not found.
Absolutely. And then you're touching on a strategy as well that I know you're super passionate about. I've seen you make reels about it. I've seen you focus on this in some of your clubhouse rooms, and that's the BRRRR method. So you kind of just hinted at that. So I think the BRRRR method is an incredibly powerful strategy for any investor to really understand, because you're pulling in, as Keyspire likes to call it, the fourth way to win. And sometimes, you take that lower cash flow because there's a greater return elsewhere that you're going to create. So why don't you take us through the BRRRR method? Because I know you talk and coach about it quite a bit with your clients. Take us through what that process looks like and where you make your money through that process.
Yes, definitely. And I think this will highlight as well, like everyone's looking to pull all of their money out, which is, yes, the perfect BRRRR, but you're gonna miss a lot of your first and second bases that are they're still great deals if you're only trying to find that home run property. So that is a big thing to note, that the perfect BRRRR, yes, it exists, but it's
a unicorn.
It's a unicorn, and like you have to be willing to take a couple bases to get there first, and it might turn out to be a home run. Like my duplex, with that appreciation and how that went up, it was a home run. But when I bought it, I wasn't banking on that home run. I was just buying a solid property in a good area. So first of all, number one with the BRRRR method is buy. So buying a property that you see potential in. So how can you add value to this property? So the properties that I'm looking at would be a single family home in a good neighborhood. A lot of them in London, you can buy a residential zoning property and add an income suite. The one I'm looking at right now is actually in duplex zoning. So not that that matters as much, but it does to mortgage companies. But in London, they're pretty much all considered the same. So adding an income suite into the basement, which I figure with a little updating upstairs, is about $100,000. Separately metering, so you're adding the value that way. So you're buying, let's say for $500,000, you're putting $100,000 into it. And then at the end of the day, I'm looking at something, even if that ARV, so after repair value, is $600,000, that's a win for me. If I can pull all of my renovation money out of the property, that in my mind is a great BRRRR. If I can find something where I can pull maybe a little bit more, leave a little less in the property, amazing, like great. But those are, like, again, harder to find, and maybe like second base kind of properties. And then your home run would definitely be where you're pulling all of that money out. But again, in a year when I refinance, maybe the market has gone up to that and I can pull some more out. So I'm optimistic about that, but I'm not banking the whole strategy on pulling out all my money. So buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat.
And the key thing is that repeat. Because honestly, once you start pulling that money out, just keep turning it over. And that's where you're going to build that portfolio. And that's where you're going to see the major returns. If you do it as a one-off, you'll do very, very well. But you've got this capital that you got back. Reinvest it and keep the ball rolling until you've run out. Because again, if you're doing a lot of like 1 and 2 base type properties where you're pulling out your renos or a decent chunk of change and not all of your capital, you will eventually run out. And that's where the skill of then raising capital comes into play for these.
Yes.
right? And I know
Re-strategizing.
absolutely, and I know that's what you're actively going through right now. So you're looking at a property right now that you actually have for sale, right? You're
Yes.
agent, if I remember correctly, right? And
Yes.
it's unfortunately not getting the attention that you think it deserves, but you see the potential in it. So, you're actively looking at how you can make that happen, right?
Yeah, I like to joke on this one. I've already said said it to my clients. I'm like, this is full service real estate. Like, if your house doesn't sell for what you want, I will buy it.
I mean,
But yes,
you see those agents who advertise that, but you're legit going to do that.
exactly. But I mean, I see the potential in it. And like, I've given them other strategies. Like, I've worked through, maybe they would want to keep it as a rental. Maybe they don't have the funds to put the basement suite in, but it could produce, let's say, 2,000 as is, or 2,200. How does that look on paper? They don't want anything to do with a rental property right now. So
No.
that doesn't work for them. And then there's other strategies that we can do to remarket it, and all of that. But at the end of the day, if they don't get what they want, then I'm willing to buy it, because it does make sense for the strategy I'm working with. So talking to my mortgage broker, funny again, as I said, it's harder for me to qualify for a mortgage. He kind of told me no. And then I was like, okay, what about my parents? Like, I'm sure they would love to do another joint venture with the way that these numbers work. Nope, they're tapped out because my sister just bought a duplex and they're helping her with that, which is only
Darn
fair.
siblings. We teach them and then they take our JV money.
Exactly. But really happy that she's getting
Yeah,
in. This is
that's
her first
amazing. It's
duplex. So
truly
I'm
amazing.
really happy for her. But yeah, she stole my money partner at the end of the day. Instead of just saying, okay, I can't make this happen, and just saying, okay, this deal doesn't work, in my mind, I'm like, okay, how can I make it work? So there's a couple people that have been wanting to possibly partner on something in some capacity, just from seeing the investments that we've done. I've got a really good friend that I met on Instagram that is considering partnering with me on it, which is amazing, because it's funny, when she approached me at first, she was looking for a realtor to possibly work with in St. Thomas, because that was what I was putting out on social media was a good place to invest. So we had walked through a lot of properties and they just weren't making sense. This was like a year and a half ago. No, not a year and a half ago, maybe a year ago. Yeah. So they just weren't working. And at the end of the day, I could have said, well, she's not ready to take action. Like, it's just all about the transaction. The relationship likely would have been over. But she, in everything that she was doing, she is inspiring me, because she was still actively buying properties here in London and figuring out how to make things work. And we have very similar mindsets towards, we're building for the long term, and we're wanting to acquire properties. So we had chatted just about how we could make this work. She can get a mortgage. I have the funds. So it's not the typical structure of how they typically work. And then she's doing all the admin and I'm doing all of the renovation, which is amazing. I hate paperwork, like pain point there. And then she's like, I can't be boots on the ground. Like, I can't do this renovation. I'm like, my background's interior design. Like, I want to have the say in how the units look. So more and more, it just seems like a really great partnership. And that's the thing with joint venture partnerships. They don't have to all be black and white, look the exact same. Like, you take your two pain points and you see how you can balance those and create a win-win solution. So where I couldn't
100%.
get a mortgage, she didn't have the capital, we can combine those and then make a perfect deal. And at the end of the day, 50% of something is a lot better than 100% of nothing. So
Reach. Yes, 100%. I mean, too many people, they're, it's a scarcity mindset at the end of the day out there, that they need to have 100% or it's a no deal, right? And again, if you start realizing that, if you start giving up pieces of the pie, that there's so much opportunity that you can actually build a bigger portfolio when you're willing to open up and have those partnerships. And again, it's like you said, you're essentially leveraging out what you don't want to do. You don't like the paperwork. She loves the paperwork. Great. She'll take that aspect. You've got the money. She's got the financing. Like, you start putting the pieces together, and next thing you know, you got a solid partnership. And, at the end of the day, every single deal that you're going to do isn't always going to be that exact model, because it depends on what you bring to the table with the next person. So it's about looking for those opportunities. And you said a key word there, is that you said, how can I make this happen? Right out of Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? It's the money mindset of, it's not, oh, I can't make it happen. It's okay, how? There's always a way to make something happen, and you're going out and doing it. You're making it happen. And at the end of the day, too, because you and I were both investment agents. That's what we specialize in. And it's a matter of, we got to put our money where our mouth is. If we're going to try to show people how investments are, we got to do it too. Because again, it's that constant. And honestly, I mean, I've been investing for nearly 12 years. And if I go through a year or two without buying, people are like, really, Cameron? Really? I'm like, okay, screw it. I'm gonna have to buy something. People, because every couple of years they come back and like, are you sure? I'm like, my past doesn't show what. Okay, I'll buy something to prove it to you, and then it adds to my portfolio.
And it's funny because there's a lot of clients that have the opposite mindset. They're like, oh, well, you're a realtor. You're just going to buy all the good deals before they like come to me. And
I wish.
I know, exactly. I'm opposite. I'm like, I'm giving them all away. Like, I need to actually take a deal here and there. And yeah.
Well, and it's funny too, because like actually, I just sold one of my properties. Timing was right. We had some issues with the city shutting down one of our suites. The cash flow just went through the floor. And, but the market obviously has gone crazy. So we're like, what, talking with our partners, like, yeah, let's do it. We've got some good capital built up there. And so I had this capital sitting there, and I found this really awesome fourplex. My client's in the process of buying it, and she's trying to raise some capital. She's got all the money for down payment, closing costs, but she needs a little bit more capital to do the reno. Same thing. We're looking at doing a BRRRR. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, what? I got a little bit of capital. I'm like, I can't put a ton in. I don't want to tap myself fully up. I'm like, hey, why not? I keep preaching to her how good a deal it is. So yeah, so we bought the property, and now I'm going to be one of the joint venture partners in it. For me, it's only a small percentage stake. I think I'm getting like 10 or 11% of the deal. But I'm like, hey, it's crazy when you think about it. When you go from, you're starting to take the courses and you're like, I need to learn how to raise capital. And then all these years later, you're like, I'm the guy people are raising capital from, right? So
I know. That's like, I'm finally there. Like, and I mean, I think it's 3 years now that I've been a KeySpire member. So, and like, I didn't know anything about real estate investing before, like nothing. I didn't even know what a refinance meant. So
yeah, you call one of those guys that you didn't like on the billboard and help you out, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's wild how fast it can actually work, because I remember I was like, when I bought my condo, I had to scrape together my pennies. Like I had $8,000 to my name, and I was putting it all into a condo. And then a year and a half later, I sold it and made 60,000. So it's wild how your money just grows when you're actually like your money is working for you.
100%.
And then I'm finally at the point where on this deal it's wild that I am the money partner.
Yeah, I know. Right? You're just like, oh yeah, I got the capital. It's all good.
Because when you start, you're like, how am I going to get money?
100%. I mean, I was super young. I'm like, what 21-year-old has the capacity to start putting in? I didn't buy a personal residence, so I didn't get that 5%. I went straight into like buying rental properties while I lived with my mom. And I'm like, yeah, I don't have 20% down. I don't have $100,000. Or in like my first case, I think it was like 76,000 or something with closing costs in Alberta. And so, yeah, so I mean, you learn the skill of raising capital. And then all these years later, you're like, oh, because I raised the capital and built that equity, now I've got equity. I can be the money person for those who are starting out. It's almost like coming full circle and giving back in the community. Yeah. Oh, right. Now, speaking about giving back into the community, so you're an agent now, you're with the Prime team, and your specialty, you're actually one of the heads right now of like leading the investment division, correct?
Yes.
That's amazing. I love to hear that. That's awesome. And I honestly don't know anyone better for the job after getting to know you for the last but you've also got a passion for education and coaching. And one of the big things you've been working on is inspiring women, whether it's been through Clubhouse, you've been running Clubhouse groups, to your podcast. Let's talk a little bit about why you want to inspire women. I mean, I know why, but let's tell the podcast people. And what are some of the adventures that you're working on from that perspective? And of course, I'd love to hear about your podcast.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. So when I first started investing in real estate, when I thought of what a real estate investor looked like, it was definitely male, rich, and obviously I was neither of those. So it comes from a place of how I would want to help Lindsay 4 years ago and give Lindsay what she needed at that time and to know. It wasn't that long ago. I think it was in the early 1960s that women could not get approved for a mortgage without a cosigner because they were considered to be financially unstable. Like, that's wild. That's
Yeah.
1960. That's not that long
Not that
ago.
long ago. People are still alive from that era. Sorry, Mom.
Yeah, exactly. Same. But it's wild how far we've been able to come, but like still it wasn't that long ago. So as women, we have the ability to take financial freedom into our own hands and to not ever be in a situation where we would feel trapped. So growing up, I had someone I looked up to, an aunt in my life, and like there was always the narrative around what else was she going to do but stay. And that is, I consider that my wall. That's what I'm running from. I would never want to be in a situation where I would feel that trapped or had no other option. And it's something that I can take into my own hands by actually pursuing. And my my vehicle to get there is real estate investing. There's definitely other vehicles that other people can take, but real estate investing is what I understand. And I also have a lot of passion towards that. So
Absolutely. And I know with Kelly, who I work with, my team lead, she always says that real estate's that one great equalizer. You know, it definitely is not, it's a gender neutral business. If you hustle hard, there's no like, you know, she's one of our top agents that at our brokerage, she's number one. And in Canada, you know, between being an investor and a realtor, she's in the top 25 in Canada for our brokerage. So, you know, it just goes to show that this is a equal playing field, right? And
yeah.
everyone can be successful.
Yeah. And so I think that real estate investing needs a little bit more attention for women, like that there's not, oh, like when I go to investor meetups and everything like that, you definitely see a lot more majority of male there. So I think that it definitely deserves attention towards female being able to do this and women being able to look at real estate investing as an actual tool that they can take to get to financial freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one big thing is too, I mean, you know, the conversation around women in the workforce has been changing. There's been a lot of people pushing it. It's amazing. Like I'm definitely an advocate of that. I've always worked with, you know, empowering women. And, you know, though the name of the podcast is Manning Up on Real Estate, coming up on real estate, like, you know, women are strong and they deserve the recognition. And Lindsay's doing an amazing job being the charge for that. And I'm totally inspired by that. And the one thing is, you know, we see it, you know, if people follow the traditional method of, you know, women go stay at home, you know, you lose your job skills. And when the kids grow up, what do you have to show? And the biggest thing that we've seen, and I know Kelly is a big advocate of this, is unfortunately the divorce rate is over 55% in Canada. And who knows with COVID, when the numbers come out, it probably is going to increase. And if you've been a stay-at-home mom for 20 years, you've lost a lot of your job skill set. So getting back into the workforce is very, very difficult. We've seen it. We've had women come to us and looking for help. So, you know, understanding that this is an avenue, if you get into it, this is something you can do, build your wealth, and you're at least stable if anything happens in your life. I mean, it goes for guys and girls, but absolutely, we see a lot of that with women for sure. And so I love that you're championing that. Now, you do have a podcast, and I know, you know, I'm not the ideal candidate for the podcast, but I do want you to talk about it because I've seen some of the women you've had on the podcast, and I want you to kind of go through what your goal is with your podcast and why people should listen to it.
Yeah, thanks, Cam, for pointing that out. Yeah, so my podcast is the Lindsay Gowan Show, and I named it that just so that I could go anywhere with it. So, I mean, at some point, maybe I will have you on the podcast. It definitely centers a little bit more.
No pressure.
It definitely centers a little bit more around women in business, leadership, and then takes a strong focus on investing in real estate because, of course, that's my passion.
Of course.
But I think it's so important to highlight what strong female women role models I've had in my life. So I come from my mom, who is an entrepreneur at heart. I like to say that it's running through my veins. And then her four sisters, all entrepreneurial. There we go. I've been talking for too long. And they all have that entrepreneurial blood as well. So highlighting what they've been able to accomplish and then taking it from there. So what other strong females in my sphere have been able to accomplish, and who knows where it will go. But yeah.
I know you've had some rock stars. I saw recently you had Amy and Ali from out here in Vancouver. They're actually going to be on an episode. By the time this is recorded, that episode should already be out. But yeah, I mean, totally inspiring women, and I think it's amazing what you're doing. You're really putting that narrative out there, and I think you're going to get a good following, a good group of people who are really going to be inspired. And that's why I really wanted to have you on here, is because I do see you're out there, you're making that positive impact, and you're really doing what you can. You are honestly, like whenever Lindsay comes onto Clubhouse, that's where Lindsay and I have really gotten to know each other, even though we probably have crossed paths at a Keyspire knowing each other. I'm happy that I got to know you over the Clubhouse app, and every time she comes on, the enthusiasm that she brings, like I get energized. Honestly, I do. You've hosted a few rooms. You do the Canadian one on Wednesday mornings sometimes with Justin, and she's just there's a passion. She gets excited. She's got that energy. She's got the voice that just like, you're like, yeah, okay, let's go. I'm ready for the day, right? I love it. So I just wanted to kind of, we're getting close, and obviously I do, totally appreciate your time here. You are a very busy woman out there, crushing it in the real estate game, both on your investing, and I know you need to go raise that money and go buy that property. But I have a couple more questions for you before I let you go. First things first. One thing I do with all my speakers, because there is always that one book that's really inspired you, has really helped you out, that you always kind of resonate with. So I always want a book recommendation. What is that one book that you would say that you would recommend somebody to read that has impacted your life?
It's going to be the classic Rich Dad, Poor Dad for sure. I know, I'm sorry. I have a lot of good books that I've read, but nothing has impacted my life the way that has just totally changed my perspective. And it's so funny because, again, another recommendation by my parents that they said that I should read that book. I remember it in high school. They're like, you have to read this book. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Like a book, like I don't want to read a book. But then it was actually, I think, after I had gone to a Keyspire, not summit, but the workshop, and I read it, and it all clicked. Like I knew I always wanted to do something with like design and real estate, and I guess that always looked like flips for me, but I didn't know how to actually do that. But then realized like the flip to yourself and the legacy that you can build. It was definitely realized when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So sorry, I know that's the typical, but
we've definitely had that one a few times, but it just goes to reiterate how powerful that book is. If you've listened to a lot of the interviews on this series, when that book gets brought up, it's clearly impacted a ton of people's lives in and around the entrepreneurship, real estate related. And it's not that it's going to teach you any skills that you probably don't already know, but it's going to shift that mindset. It's going to really realize what you need to think about to be successful. And again, it's not necessarily the hustle. It's not necessarily like that. You got to start with your mind first, and then
that's everything.
And that's the big thing. You need to think like you're rich. And obviously, if you're like me, you're very busy. I highly recommend, if you can't pick up the book, get the audiobook. Audible.com is a great resource. I recommend it every time. And
that's how I read.
This is not a sponsored by Audible. I love reading. Like Lindsay, we're very busy. I'm in the car all the time. Throw on an Audible, although I'm on Clubhouse a lot more these days. You throw on an Audible, you can listen to the book and truly see what has inspired all of these amazing people who have recommended the book to fulfill their destiny in their life, right?
Yeah. And I love to give that book out. Like if we jump on a call, like with a first time investor or someone who has it, like is just thinking of buying their first house, I love giving them that book or giving them the book recommendation, because it just helps with our next conversation and primes them for actually getting in the mindset to be able to purchase. And I think that is the biggest thing. Is it's definitely action. Taking action is one of the most important things, but I would say the most important thing is your mindset. It's a make or break. And as I was getting started in real estate investing, I remember doing webinars and all of that, and like wanting to like figure out how to analyze deals and everything like that. And then it would always just be about mindset. And I'm like, like just give me the deal analyze. Like I don't need, and then it all really clicked, and it's all about mindset. You can, like whether you think you can or you can't, you're right.
Either way, you're right. Yeah, that's absolutely true. All right, final question for you here. if you were going to be getting started from scratch, like square one again, what's that one piece of advice you would give Lindsay 4 years ago?
Just do it.
Just do it.
Yeah, take action. Like, it might seem uncomfortable. Be okay being uncomfortable. I think that is the thing that has been the biggest thing in my growth, and the biggest thing in everything is you have to be uncomfortable, or you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
I love that, and it's true. I mean, at the end of the day, they say that your next level of achievement is through the ceiling you don't think you can get through, right? So
Yeah.
break through that ceiling, do the stuff that makes you uncomfortable, do it, and that's going to create your new floor at the end of the day, right? You won't go back down unless you really give up, but you won't go back down. You'll have set your bar at the next level, and you can just keep getting uncomfortable to that next level, where if that uncomfortability becomes comfortable, great, find something new, keep pushing. And I love that. I think that's amazing. And
I think it's also important to not think that you have to have it all figured out.
no.
Everything comes with time, and it seems like it's taking a lot of time. Like when you're in it, you're like, you feel like you're never going to get there. You're doing all the little steps, and it seems like you haven't come very far, but then you take a look back and see how far you've come in a short period of time. So I think that that's another thing. When you're getting started, know that you don't have to have it all figured out, but take that step in front of you and keep taking the steps, because that's what leads to massive action and massive goals.
Yeah, 100%. Lindsay, I truly appreciate you taking time out of your day to join me here on the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you guys go and check out Lindsay's podcast. That is the Lindsay Gowan Show. You are on, I'm assuming, Spotify, Apple, like the works.
I think so. I don't put it out there, but yeah, I definitely Spotify and YouTube. I think it's on Apple Podcasts, but I'm not 100%
Okay,
sure.
well, if it's not, go to Spotify, check her out. I highly recommend go listen to her podcast, drop her some reviews, help her out. It's a new podcast. You just launched it like a couple of months ago, I think.
Yeah, I think so. We have 9 episodes so far.
Awesome.
I have to get a 10th out there.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So go check her out. Lindsay, where can they best connect with you on socials as well outside the podcast if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, so Clubhouse, of course. Like, I love chatting on Clubhouse. My mom always jokes that I'm always on Clubhouse, which is half true. My Clubhouse friend said that I wasn't there much, so they're there more. But also Instagram. I love connecting with people on Instagram. Love seeing what everyone's up to, and then that's definitely the best platform to get me at.
And what's your Instagram handle?
Lindsay Gowan. I make it really simple.
Super simple. And we're gonna connect that in the show notes, so you can go hit her up. If you're looking for investments in the London, Ontario market or in and around that area, I do highly recommend you guys get in contact with Lindsay. Or even if you're not looking for investments and you're looking for a great realtor, definitely the Prime team has you guys covered. And actually, I was gonna say, I caught you say something earlier when you're like, we prime our clients. I'm like, ha.
I didn't even notice I said that.
I got that earlier. So yeah, I highly recommend get connected with Lindsay, get connected with the Prime team. They are amazing, and they will definitely help you guys out. And they are doing some really incredible things in the market. I mean, I'm definitely watching, and what I'm seeing happening from Prime, I'm like, all right, what can we implement out here? So we're watching, we're seeing what's going on, and we're loving it. So keep it up.
Love it. Right back at you guys. Your team's awesome as well. And I love connecting with you on Clubhouse, Cam. And yes, thank you for all the wonderful words and having me on the podcast. I feel honored. So
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who's listened to this podcast. Again, we truly appreciate if you love the podcast, if you love Lindsay, make sure you drop us a review, throw that 5 stars up there. It truly does help us. And don't forget, connect with us on social media. We are here to help you guys if you have any other questions. And that's it for me today. Thank you so much again, Lindsay. And to the listeners, we'll talk to you on the next episode.